The government gives the owners of undeveloped land notice that they might not be able to rebuild should they build from now on, not to build. That's not a taking. Government gives people notice of emergency situations that have arisen all the time. When you put a comprehensive plan element on sea level rise, that's not going to be a taking. When you change your building codes, just like we change our building codes, they're changing building codes up in New Jersey right now as we speak. That's not a taking. They learned the lessons that we learned in South Florida after Andrew. We changed our building codes too to adapt to Mother Nature, or should I say parent nature, in order not to be sexist and discriminating against Mother Nature in that sense. And then the government purchased a fee in properties vulnerable to sea level rise. If the government wants to purchase property in order to preserve it or to make sure there's no development on it, they can do that too, if they can purchase it. Again, no takings risk. There are minimal takings risks, okay? These are strategies for sea level rise that there is a minimal takings risk, but a competent lawyer should be able to convince a competent judge, I'm asking too much maybe, that a taking is not occurred. An overlay district, a sea level rise overlay district. If you're in this area, we're going to treat you in a special fashion under our land use law. Downzoning properties that have not yet been developed and saying, from now on you may not develop this property. You haven't invested a cent in development, but from now on you will not be able to develop in a certain fashion because you're in this special zone. Restrictions on non-conforming buildings. So I own a property in this special zone, this protected area, but it's not in conformity, and the government says, you may not improve that property anymore. You may not add to it. Again, those are not takings under regular old land use regulation laws, zoning law. This kind of thing is not a taking. Enhancing floodplain restrictions, which already exist and are already valid. Permits, requiring a permit for soft armoring, like beach nourishment. Requiring living shorelines. This is an interesting strategy. You require the landowner to have a living shoreline in front of hard armoring structures to abate some of the problems caused by hard armoring. Not a problem. And in most jurisdictions, transferable development rights. You say to a landowner who has property in a vulnerable area, we don't want you to develop that area, but we're going to transfer development rights to another area. Inland, non-sensitive land, your property, if you take the value of your beach parcel A and add it to the enhanced rights we're giving you on non-beach parcel B, you are 100% in the same financial shape. None of these things poses even a moderate takings risk. There are some things that do pose a more serious, but not serious, more serious, but not totally serious risk. Okay? And you can just look at the list. Special assessments, we've done special assessments for close to a century in this country. That's how we get sidewalk projects, storm sewer projects in this country. The Supreme Court had a case about a year ago on the funding of special assessments. They basically said to local governments and state governments, leave us alone, do whatever you want to do. Because the bottom line is, if you have a special assessment that enhances the value of the property, why are landowners complaining? And the reason is because they have lawyers. Okay, now you can increase buffers in the coastal zone area. You can prohibit certain kinds of hard engineered structures like hard armoring. You could have a massive public land acquisition financed by new taxes and bond issues, followed by resale to more responsible owners, that is, owners who aren't going to do things that jeopardize the environment. You could do land banking using land purchases, and that the government again could sort of, as owner, regulate the kinds of uses. And then you could exact coastal impact fees, probably, but depending on what the Supreme Court says in this new case. So all of these pose moderate risk, but if carefully crafted, they shouldn't pose a significant problem. All those, by the way, those abbreviations there, they just refer to the types of takings. PT is partial taking, EX is exaction, etc. Okay, it just tells you the kinds of potential takings problems that are risked in all these instances. Okay, now the rubber hits the road. There are certain sea level rise adaptation strategies that could pose serious takings risks. Okay? And these are the ones we have to be very careful with. The first one is a development exaction of a conservation easement or fee title interest. Now this might actually be ideal, right? Okay. You say to your private landowners in the areas affected by sea level rise, you say to them, this is what we want you to do. We're okay with your trying to develop the property, but we want you to grant the public or a charitable organization, a non-governmental organization, like a trust, a land trust, a conservation easement. And basically the purpose of the conservation easement is the holder of a conservation easement will be able to stop you from rebuilding and from engaging in certain development practices that are contrary to the best interests of the public. So if, for example, there's a coastal storm or there's high erosion, normal erosion outside of the storm, and your building, your structures start to fall into the sea, we're not going to let you rebuild. In fact, we might force you to spend money to clean them up. So, can the government do this? Can the government exact these kinds of conservation easements, or even, exact a fee title interest? We'll let you build on the coast. We'll let you build close to the water, but not too close. And instead of creating a buffer, we're going to force you to grant the public title to the part that's closest to the water. Can you do that? Well, you may be able to do it, but it poses a serious taking risk. The government would like to, in many instances, prohibit new permanent structures in these designated sea level rise zones, declaring them to be public nuisance. And let me tell you, they have the attributes of a public nuisance. We know that living in Florida. We know that building too close to, and they found this out in New Jersey, building too close to the water poses a harm to all of us. It poses a harm. Having structures too close to unprotected shores, when a storm hits, those structures will be destroyed and pose harm to structures that are inland. And if there are not sewer systems there, and even if there are, but certainly if there aren't, what's going to happen? We're going to have an overflow of septic systems, fecal coliforms, other poisons put into the environment. One could make the argument that to build too close to the coast is in itself a nuisance, a public nuisance, an activity that poses harm to the general community, like a factory that pollutes poisons into the air. Now, that factory that pollutes poisons into the air could be found to be a public nuisance. There are cases that say that. And coal mines and other mines that cause significant pollution. This one's really tough. It's really tough to say that beautiful condo building they built on the beach, that's a public nuisance. But let me tell you, one day after a storm, people will look at that condo, what's left of that condo building, and the havoc that was reaped by its construction and going through the storm, and they would say, oh my God, we would have been a lot better off if we had never allowed that building to be built. All right? The most frustrating thing about what happened to me when I moved back to Florida is one of the things I grew up in Central Florida. My favorite part of the state was Daytona Beach. I was a teenager. I loved Daytona Beach. When you drive on A1A on the east coast of Florida, you know this better than anybody, you can't even see the beach anymore. You literally cannot see the beach because of overdevelopment on the right side, which I would call the wrong side, of A1A. Okay. Government can ban hard and soft armoring that's financed by the owners of development parcels themselves. Okay? That might be a taking. You You've got your landowners who say, all right, we don't want